This is chapter 14 called Uncle Benny Hero. When Jerry and Rachel drew near their house on Beam's Place, they stopped short in amazement, for a very extraordinary sight greeted them. There were Mama and Papa and Grandma and Uncle Benny all standing around on the Pye's front lawn under the chestnut tree. And there was a strange dog tearing around and around in wider and wider circles, snorting painfully, acting half mad. In wonder, feeling like outsiders to this family picture in which they had no part, for obviously a great moment in the Pye family was taking place, as great a moment perhaps as that of Papa running up the down escalator, Jerry and Rachel slowly drew nearer. Then the strange dog spied them and raced toward them. He leaped in the air in front of them, half crying, half barking with joy, licking their faces, whimpering, talking the best he knew how. He was a full-grown dog, a fox terrier, and he was brown and white. For a moment, Jerry and Rachel were speechless as the truth dawned on them. In their minds, it had been so firmly fixed that Ginger Pye was on the Banker's Express, it didn't seem possible that this might be he here on Beam Place. Still, all of a sudden, the truth like skyrockets burst upon them, and first Jerry and then Rachel called, "Ginger, Ginger, Ginger, Ginger!" For it was Ginger. They could tell by the odd crooked marking on his back. They knew it was Ginger. Ginger was back, and they hugged him and petted him and kissed him. It was Big Ginger, not Little Ginger Pup anymore. It was funny, but all the long months that Ginger had been gone, everyone still thought of him as the little puppy such as he had been when he disappeared. Of course, he would have been growing and growing all this time, but everyone had forgotten he would be doing this. But so he had, and this was Ginger, and he was not on the Banker's Express going heaven knows where, to what circus and what strange lands. He was right here in the Pye's own front yard, and he was beside himself with joy, and so were they. "I found him! I found him!" yelled Uncle Benny. "I told you I'd find him! I found Ginger! I was looking for Friskies and Japanese, and I found Ginger! He ran up to me and kissed me! I found him!" Ginger had a long, frayed, shaggy, broken-off rope tied to his collar that was exactly like the piece of rope in Wally Bullwinkle's shed. "Where'd he come from? Where'd he come from?" asked Jerry and Rachel excitedly. They wanted to tell all about the Banker's Express and the policeman, but first they wanted to know how Ginger got to be here when they thought that he was on his way to New York. So Grandma, with corrections and interruptions from Uncle Benny, explained what had happened as far as she knew Uncle Benny's and her end of the story. They had already explained it to Mama and Papa, but of course they were happy to explain it all over again to Rachel and Jerry. Well, as Grandma and Uncle Benny were on their way over here, they had left very early, just a little after 7, because Uncle Benny was impatient to get to Jerry and to the birthday house, and he hoped the ice cream was going to be steamboats again. And as they were walking along 2nd Avenue near the new big house, Uncle Benny said, "Down, down." That meant he wanted to get out of his express wagon and chase the Friskies and the Japanese. That's his words for butterflies. So Grandma stopped, and Uncle Benny climbed out, and he went chasing butterflies from hedge to hedge and bush to bush, while she drew his empty, squeaking wagon behind her. Suddenly they heard a frantic barking and yelping, like a dog in terrible pain. They had thought perhaps a dog had been run over, and while they were looking around to see, why, the next thing they knew, this strange dog came bounding out from some yard behind them. Grandma couldn't tell which house, but she knew the general direction. "Wally Bullwinkle's," murmured Rachel in awe at the way things, like the frayed rope on Ginger's neck, were being pieced together. "Shh," said Jerry, "there's more." Grandma went on with the explaining. "It's Ginger! It's Ginger!" Uncle Benny had yelled, and the dog kept jumping up on Uncle Benny and kissing him. But Grandma thought this was just a dog, just any dog. She hadn't realized it was Ginger because she still thought of Ginger the way they all did, as being a tiny little puppy. So she said, "Go back, doggy, nice doggy, go back." But the dog didn't want to go back. Whenever Grandma said, "Go back," to him, he cringed and slunk on the ground. The minute they went a few paces, he bounded along eagerly and happily with them. Grandma thought, "My, what a friendly dog." He just kept jumping on her, trying to kiss her, and he kept licking her hands, and he behaved the same way with Uncle Benny. It was as though he was trying to tell them something, the way he had whimpered and barked. "It's Ginger! It's Ginger!" Uncle Benny kept yelling over and over again. But Grandma didn't think this was possible. First, because she remembered Ginger as such a little puppy, and second, because she really thought though she had never told him so, that Jerry and Rachel would never see their dog again. She long ago thought he must be dead. So she had said hesitantly to Uncle Benny, "No, this is not Ginger. This dog is too big." And again she said, "Go home, doggy." But the dog would not go back. He would stop for a moment, pretending to obey her. Then he would prance up behind them, following them, dragging his long rope behind them. "This Ginger," Uncle Benny insisted positively. "I told Jerry and Rachel I'd find Ginger, and I did," he said with satisfaction. The dog kept knocking Uncle Benny over. He was so happy and appreciative of being recognized, but Uncle Benny was too delighted to mind the bumps. "Ginger, Ginger," he murmured over and over again. So Grandma finally said, "Well, let him come along with us and see what the folks think. If it's not Ginger, we'll bring him back here tonight." "This poor Ginger, this our Ginger," said Uncle Benny sadly. Grandma had already noticed the terrible wound on the dog's forehead, and she really didn't want him to go back anyway to people who mistreated him. So she picked up the rope, and she and the dog and Uncle Benny started as fast as they could go down 2nd Avenue on their way to the pies. "But then," said Grandma, she was as excited as the rest, "an odd thing happened. The 2nd Avenue trolley came along behind us, the one going to town, and it stopped right beside us, right in the middle of the street. And a man and a boy leaned out the back door and yelled at us. They said, 'Hey, that's our dog. Bring him here.' But the dog broke loose from me and ran in someone's backyard. Hiding he was. The two of them on the trolley argued with the motorman then. They wanted him to stay there while they caught their dog or send him home or something. But the motorman said, 'There's more than you that wants to catch the Banker's Express. Stay on or get off.' And then he just started up, he did, and off the trolley went, the man and the boy leaning out the back window all the way up the street and looking very disturbed and angry. The minute the car was out of sight, it stopped for Judge Ball, and that was all. The dog came running back to us, trembling and quivering. I put 2 and 2 together," said Grandma, "and figured those people owned him and treated him meanly the way they acted." "That was Wally Bullwinkle and his father," interrupted Jerry excitedly. "On their way to the Banker's Express," added Rachel, almost overcome with the way the story was working out. "So here we are," said Grandma. They had arrived right after Jerry and Rachel had left for the strawberry hunt. And of course, the minute they got in sight of the Pye's house, the dog was nearly frantic with joy. And of course, Mama and Daddy and Papa recognized him immediately by the odd marking on his back. And they said, "Uncle Benny's right. This is Ginger." "What under the sun kept you so long?" they asked Rachel and Jerry. "We thought you'd never get here." So now everyone had to hear Rachel and Jerry's side of the story, all about the Banker's Express and its stopping, and Wally Bullwinkle on it, and the yellow hat, which the same hat Jerry was holding in his hands, and about the chief of police and the reconnoitering of Wally Bullwinkle's house, and the circus posters, and the crowd outside, and Ginger's tawny hair on the old rags, and the frayed end of the rope that matched the rope that he had on now, the barbed wire and everything. Grandma said, imagine, he heard Uncle Benny's squeaky cart and he recognized it. They all marveled at the smart dog that Ginger was, to have recognized Uncle Benny's squeaky cart, just the sound of it. "He probably heard us every Saturday and longed for a chance to make his escape," said Grandma. And she said, now that she thought about it, she had frequently heard a dog whining over there in that part of 2nd Avenue, but she never given it a minute's thought. Grandma was not as familiar with all the sounds that Ginger made as Rachel and Jerry were, or she would have known it was Ginger. If only she had commented. But she just naturally thought it was one of the many dogs who lived over there. Practically every house had some dog or other living in it, and since she never saw this dog that whimpered, how could she possibly have known it was Ginger all the time? None of them could get over it. To think that Ginger had, no doubt, heard Uncle Benny's squeaky cart every Saturday and never been able to get to Grandma and Uncle Benny. To think of him straining and tearing at his rope every Saturday probably, trying to get away, whining and whimpering to make Grandma hear. And Grandma hearing but not realizing that there, behind the barbed wire and the sheds and the posters and the Bullwinkle house, was Ginger. It was enough to make anybody cry, and they all gulped down lumps in their throats. Somehow, though, on this day, when the Bullwinkles had planned to take him away once and for all, he had made the supreme effort and eluded them. Perhaps that was how he had hurt his head, jumping over the barbed wire. Awful as it was to think of Ginger hurting his head on the barbed wire, they hoped that that was the way it happened, and not that he had been mistreated. But that he had been mistreated also they didn't doubt. Otherwise, he would have grown fond of his new master after all this time, and he would have forgotten the pies since he had been such a little puppy when he was stolen. Moreover, they all noticed the yellow hat. Jerry had been secretly hurt and worried because it seemed to him that Ginger was not as happy to see him as he was the others. He had jumped up and kissed him once or twice, but he acted rather scared, though with the others he was delirious with joy. At first, Jerry thought, "He's sore at me for not finding him when he found me in school with my pencil." Then suddenly Jerry remembered he was holding Wally Bullwinkle's yellow hat, and he dropped it on the ground. Immediately, Ginger leaped up into his arms and stayed there at least 2 minutes, kissing him and crying. When he began running around again, they all noticed how every time Ginger came anywhere near the yellow hat, he plastered his little bit of a tail down and he whimpered and skulked on the ground. This was the final proof, if any more proof were needed, that it was Wally who had kidnapped Ginger, since Wally was the owner of this yellow hat and likewise the person Grandma had seen on the 2nd Avenue trolley claiming Ginger was his. Now they all speculated on what might have happened if today had not happened to be Jerry's birthday and Uncle Benny and Grandma had not left home earlier than usual to come to the pies. Then Ginger certainly would at the moment be on the Banker's Express, tearing to New York, and perhaps the far west with Wally Bullwinkle gone for good. What a joyous reunion this was, joyous and sad all at once. It was joyous, of course, because Ginger was back, but it was sad because Ginger had the dreadful raw sore on his forehead, indicating that he had either been mistreated or else had badly torn it making his escape over the barbed wire. The gash was so deep, Mama was afraid the fur would never grow back on it again. So Ginger and all of them would always have this reminder of his terrible kidnapping and his stay with the mean Bullwinkles. Jerry and Rachel cried. They had not cried in public when Ginger was stolen, but they cried now, seeing his hurting head. They couldn't love Ginger enough to make up for all the long months he'd gone without loving. And they just couldn't get over the whole thing. Here he was, a full-grown dog now that had been such a little puppy when he was stolen on Thanksgiving Day, and yet he remembered and loved them all still. He was a wonderful, wonderful dog. Ginger licked their tears away, and Gracie the cat, when Ginger, panting, finally laid down to rest a moment, licked at his wounded face. But Ginger didn't rest long. He had to tear around and tear around again to show how happy he was. And he was still just as smart as ever. "Look at that, will you?" said tall Sam Duty, coming up with his camera at this moment and joining in with the exclaiming and the marveling and the piecing together of the story. "Look at that dog, will you?" For Ginger was doing another thing as smart as finding Jerry in school and recognizing Uncle Benny's squeaking cart. The tar wagon had been over the street while Rachel and Jerry had been strawberry hunting, and Beam's place was sticky and shiny with tar. The smell of tar was everywhere. Gracie the cat had occasion to wish to get to the other side of the street. This was obvious to all of them because she kept going to the gutter, sticking a paw tentatively in the edge of the tar, and meowing unhappily and disapprovingly. She wanted to get across the street, but she was too fastidious about stepping in tar to do so. Ginger watched her quizzically, his head on one side, taking in the balking situation. Then he gave an impatient snort and grabbed Gracie by the nape of the neck and ran across the tarry road with her. He didn't mind getting his toes black, but she minded getting hers black. This way she stayed neat and tidy. Then, when Gracie wanted to come back, which she did immediately, meowing forlornly at them all the minute that Ginger deposited her on the other side, Ginger ran across, grabbed her up again by the nape of the neck, and brought her back. Gracie the cat was astonished, and so were all of them. He was the smartest dog any of them had ever seen or read about anywhere to do such a thing as that. He had been a smart puppy, and now he was a smart dog. Sam Duty snapped a couple of pictures of Ginger crossing the tar with Gracie, but since the dog and the cat were moving so fast, he didn't expect the pictures would amount to much. Ginger just picked up life right where it had left off for him back on Thanksgiving Day. It almost seemed as though there should be the smell of roast chicken in the air and drumsticks to pick on. Ginger scratched Gracie's fleas, dashed for the orange duster, and brought Jerry rocks to throw for him. It turned out that while Ginger had been gone, he had learned a great number of new tricks which Jerry and Rachel and Uncle Benny learned about gradually. For instance, he could stand on his front paws, and he could also turn a somersault. "You don't have to do any tricks," said Jerry, hugging him, "just so you're back. That's all I care. You don't ever have to do one more trick." He couldn't bear to think that perhaps the terrible scar on Ginger's forehead was caused by a blow given him while he was being taught a new trick Wally and his father expected to use in vaudeville or some circus. Ginger's eyes had always been beautiful, gay, sparkling, laughing, and intelligent. Now they were even more beautiful because there was sadness and pleading and anxious questioning in them, too. It was all any of them could do not to cry when they looked into Ginger's eyes, and each one vied with others, saying endearing words to him, petting him, and making up for all the sadness he had suffered shut up in that miserable Bullwinkle shed, while all along they had been comfortable in their nice warm house. To think that he had never been allowed out of Wally's little yard, even for a good brisk run. Naturally, since he was a stolen dog, Wally had to keep him under lock and key. Oh, Ginger, sobbed Rachel, every now and then, kissing his wounded, hurting head. All the times we were right down there calling him and looking for him, said Jerry. Big dog, keep out, said Rachel indignantly. Wally was probably holding his fist over Ginger's mouth every time he saw us coming. Ginger probably heard us and knew that we were right there. Well, comforted Mrs. Pye, that helped him to remember you and keep you in mind until the right moment came for his escape. It got to be noontime. The children all had some dinner, and then they had ice cream. Ginger had some too, but the children didn't even realize they were eating ice cream. They were so excited. If there had been lumps of frozen peach in it, as it was in Grandma's, they might have known, but there weren't lumps. This was box ice cream, bought at a store, though not Steamers, Pickaxes, or Robins. Sam Duty had some ice cream too, and so did the chief of police. He came by just then, having had his buns and coffee at last, to make a report on the latest developments. When the Pies could finally persuade Ginger to stop barking at him, Chief Larimore said, I telephoned down the line when I got home, and I ordered the Bankers Express stopped and searched in Westport. Your dog wasn't on it, he said. Chief Larimore was not yet aware that the dog who had been barking at him was the long-missing famous Ginger. When he was told this and that the quest was ended, he looked a shade disappointed. It was obvious that he had other plans, such as ordering all dogs in shows to be examined carefully to see if they might be Ginger. However, Jerry and Rachel looked at him admiringly. He had, after all, thought of marvelous ways of tracing their dog, having the Bankers Express itself stopped, for example, that the chief's ruffled spirits were smoothed. Nevertheless, in case the chief might feel it was a reflection on his office that Ginger had not been found by him, but had been found by Uncle Bennie, a 3-year-old, one of Cranberry's youngest citizens, he said, the young'uns threw me off track with that picture they drew of the man. We thought Wally Bullwinkle was just a kid in my class, explained Jerry apologetically, for now it seemed as though from the beginning it should have been as plain as the nose on his face that Wally had been the thief. We didn't know Wally was a thief, and he didn't look like the picture we drew of the unsavory character. We didn't know an unsavory character could just be a boy in my class, said Jerry. Wally hasn't any mother, said Rachel. She didn't want Wally to go to jail. She wanted someone to be nice to him and make him nice. His father probably didn't know that he had stolen Ginger, she said, making excuses for Mr. Bullwinkle also. That may well be, said Chief Larimore, but if you have any more thefts, he said, don't draw me a thief. And he tramped off up the street, having to get to the bank before it closed. And the next two came by were Mr. Badger and Dick Badger and Duke. They had been out in Cheshire and missed all the excitement. Mr. Badger wanted some pictures for the Cranberry Chronicle, and Sam Duty took them. One picture he took was called A Happy Reunion. It showed all the family gathered around Ginger while Ginger scratched the fleas of Gracie the cat. Another picture he took of just Uncle Bennie and Ginger. Sam Duty named Uncle Bennie the hero of the day. Uncle Bennie had been a hero before, just for being an uncle at age 3. Now he was a hero also for being the one to find Ginger. For it was Uncle Bennie, after all, who had insisted that Ginger was Ginger and had persuaded Grandma to let him follow the Pies. I knew it was Ginger, he affirmed importantly. There's the picture of everybody. The picture that Sam Duty took of Uncle Bennie and Ginger would win the $15 prize. That's what Jerry and Rachel thought. Not the pictures of East Rock at all, not even the GNU, one who turned out to be such a beauty. Uncle Bennie, Uncle Bennie, Uncle Bennie, they all exclaimed affectionately. Uncle Bennie, hero! Uncle Bennie beamed. How the day passed, no one knew, but at last the great birthday day. The sort of a holiday, the day of Ginger Pie's dramatic return, came to an end. Everyone had gone, all the guests, the interested neighbors, Uncle Benny, and Grandma. And it was night, the first night that Ginger was home and curled up sleeping on Jerry's feet as he used to. And there was, in the distance, that wonderful occasional sound of the trains running from Boston to New York and New York to Boston. And Jerry said it first. He said, comfortably, hoping she was not asleep, "Rachel." "Uh-huh," said Rachel, squirming delightfully. She knew what was coming. "Oh, Boombernickles," said Jerry. "Oh, Martin Boombernickles." Rachel laughed softly. "Yes," she said. And then what happened? Just as though they had never stopped. Ginger twitched his ears and the loose skin on his back and legs to let Jerry know he was here and he was happy. Then he lowered his head down on his paws again and he let out a deep sigh that sounded almost like a sob. There was so much relief and pain and pleasure and remembering. The end. But before we go, I want to read you this little bit here in the back of the book that's about the author. It's kind of interesting. Eleanor Estes grew up in West Haven, Connecticut, which she renamed Cranberry for her classic stories about the Moffats and Pye families. A children's librarian for many years, she launched her writing career with the publication of the Moffats in 1941. Two of her outstanding books about the Moffats, Rufus M. and the Middle Moffat, were awarded Newbery honors, as was her short novel, The 100 Dresses. She won the Newbery Medal for Ginger Pie in 1952. That's before Grandpa and Grandma were even born. The inspiration for Ginger Pie, the intellectual dog, came from a real dog who appeared pencil in mouth in the window of the ivy-colored school of Eleanor Estes' childhood. Isn't that cool? I hope you liked this book. Love you all. Bye.